Now, I'll probably get cancelled for saying this, but here goes nothing. We in this country like to present ourselves as a better way of life. We're tolerant, progressive and liberal-minded, unlike some states around the world. We treat women in the same way we treat men. Actually, I think in some cases we like to think we prioritise the protection of women in a way in which we don't for men. We see campaigns warning men not to stare. We hear about the threat of mansplaining and the #MeToo campaign, which highlighted a predacious abuse of power. The world's good and great made their voices known online and on our streets that this couldn't continue, that no girl or woman should ever face such things ever again. But I put it to you that in many respects, the more progressive, liberal and tolerant we purport to become, the more regressive we actually move as far as women's rights are concerned. You see, if you're not the right sort of woman, then to hell with any idea of protection. Women who argue that biological men who simply self-ID, wake up one morning and decide I'm Doreen, not Darren, as a woman, shouldn't be allowed into sex-segregated spaces like changing rooms and women's refuges. Some of them, domestic abuse survivors, like J.K. Rowling. Fair enough, you might think. Not so. These women can lose their jobs, they can lose their incomes, they can even face death threats. You see, we like women, but only if they know their place in 2022's identity pecking order. Being the wrong kind of woman is perhaps exemplified in a report out this week. The Telford Inquiry revealed case after case of rapes and abuse of over 1,000, and I repeat that number, 1,000 young women over decades. It sounds like it should be part of some disturbing drama, not the day-to-day life in liberal Britain. So how could it happen here? We place the protection of women and girls above all else, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. When primarily working-class girls asked for help, a brave act in and of itself, the authorities, social workers, schools, councils and even coppers turned the other cheek. One of the survivors actually said that they were dismissed as child prostitutes. Whilst Westminster and others tweeted about #MeToo to show just how virtuous they are, officials ignored the destruction of lives without platforms in Parliament or polite society. Now again, these women ought to have known their place, apparently, in the identity pecking order. Both trans and ethnic minorities are above women in our new intolerance. A girl of 12 was repeatedly raped only hours after police had ignored her begging for help in what's been described by Maggie Oliver, herself a former detective constable with Greater Manchester Police, as a case that's not unique. And I tell you with all honesty and sincerity that it turns my stomach and breaks my heart. These girls won't see protests on the streets for them. It would be too politically insensitive to do so. They might be accused of racism. These girls won't see social media hashtags for them. It may stir up racial tensions. And these girls won't hear of how this will never happen again, because heaven forfend somebody not invite me back to their candlelit supper or unfollow me on Twitter or Instagram. And this is the consequence of political correctness in Britain. It stifles speech and it stifles debate and leads to the creation of authorities that feel too afraid to do their damn jobs and protect society's most vulnerable groups. On Thursday, calls for a public inquiry into sexual exploitation in Oldham were rejected. Even now, given all that we've eventually found out, it's still considered too uncomfortable a conversation to have. In any genuinely liberal and tolerant society, there wouldn't be fear of being accused of transphobia or racism when it comes to seeking conversations and voicing concerns about the protection of women and girls. If you ask me, we need to push back against this culture of political correctness and fear of saying the wrong thing. It means nothing's said and nothing's heard at all. And as we hear arguments during the Tory leadership campaign about maternity legislation being stripped of the words mother and woman, perhaps misogyny, in 2022 is the one acceptable form of intolerance remaining. And I'd like to see a pushback before we actually usher in an age in which certain groups matter more than others.